All right, what is going on, everybody? What is today? Wednesday? Whiskey Wednesday. So tonight we are going to, or I'm going to be sampling what is for me my kind of like my ultimate unicorn. Um, if you guys know me, I love sampling some of this old, real dusty, vintage bourbon. I love the old Jim Beams. I love the old Wild Turkeys. I love all that old stuff. I love just kind of sampling stuff throughout history. And tonight, I have something that's been on my list for a long time. It's something that I actually have. You can actually see right behind me here. This is an Old Crow Chessman from 1969. The one that I have behind me is actually the pawn. It is empty. There's nothing in it. I will tell you though, it does smell like a musty basement, and anytime I open that box behind me, it fills the room, fumigates the room with just this old, dusty, musty smell. So I was able to get my hands on a 1 ounce sample of the Old Crow Chessman from a good friend of mine. So we're going to be sampling that tonight. Something that I've never had before, something that I've really been interested and really been wanting to try. There's not a lot of places that have this on the shelf. The only one that comes to mind right now is actually Bardstown Bourbon Company in Bardstown, Kentucky. They have it on their menu, but it's super expensive for a 1 ounce pour, and rightfully so. This stuff really isn't, it's not made anymore. These pieces behind me, the Old Crow Chessmen, these were made in the late 1960s by Old Crow. That was actually made by National Distillers up until 1987 when the brand was actually sold to Jim Beam. And Old Crow used to be touted as really the best whiskey in the world. James Crow was a Scottish immigrant, emigrated here from Scotland in the 1820s to Pennsylvania, moved his way down into Kentucky, and started working for the distilleries down in Kentucky. The most famous one that he worked for was Oscar Pepper Distillery, where he kind of perfected the sour mash process. And he was really the first one to kind of take a scientific approach to whiskey making. He used his sacchrometer to measure the sugar levels. He used litmus paper to measure the pH level so that he knew that everything coming off the still was going to be consistent. The other thing that was really kind of growing in popularity that James Crow really kind of created on his own was putting his brand name on the head of the barrel and on the body of the barrel, so that when it was sitting at the tavern, you could actually see that the brand, what you were drinking, because it was being poured right out of the barrel. And his whiskey was called Old Crow. And being branded on the barrel, that's actually where we get the term brand name. So he was a pioneer of his day, and the whiskey that he made was really kind of heralded and is widely considered by many in the bourbon industry today as being some of the best bourbon ever made. And what we have behind me, what I have behind me, the Old Crow Chessman set from 1969. Is considered some of the best whiskey within the past 100 years. His whiskey was so popular that governors, senators, presidents would use his whiskey to sway elections. The story was often told that after Abraham Lincoln heard of Ulysses S. Grant's success during the Civil War, after giving his men Old Crow whiskey, Abraham Lincoln said, "How do I get more of it, and how do I get it shipped out to the soldiers in the battlefield?" So this is something that's been on my radar for a long time. Like I said, I was lucky enough to find someone who was able to get me a sample of it. It's just a 1 ounce sample, but I'm super excited to give it a go. Anybody who's wondering, who sees this stuff on secondary, you see some of the bottles on secondary, that say Old Crow. If you're really looking to get true National Distillers Old Crow before it was sold to Jim Beam, and before it became a bottom shelf bourbon, really what you're looking for is anything that was distilled before 1987. And those Old Crows can fetch some pretty high dollar amounts, primarily because they're made in the fashion that and with the mash bill that James Crow used himself. And National Distillers put that out until 1987, like I said, until they were sold to Jim Beam, and it was put on the bottom shelf of every liquor store everywhere. It's kind of a sad example to see of a brand that was heralded as the best bourbon in the world, And now you see it on the bottom shelf going for as little as like $8 for a bottle. Oh. So this is just a 1 ounce sample. The color on this is absolutely beautiful, very dark, very rich. The nose on it is exactly what I would expect out of an old dusty bourbon. Um, you get that mustiness, you get that, a little bit of hay on there. There's some grassiness in there, but there's this beautiful brown sugar, like a toasted sugar note in there that I get a lot of times on these older whiskeys that have been sitting in a decanter like the one behind me, or just because they were made so long ago. I mean, this is 1969 was when this was released. I want to say, I think this is 8-year-old bourbon that's in here. So we're talking about the early 1960s that this was distilled. Different water, different yeast, different corn, different wood that was used in the barrel. So everything was different. You don't have this reverse osmosis process that distillers use now. You don't have these kind of purifying processes or all these filtration processes that really kind of keep a standard for bourbon coming out of the barrel and going into the bottle. So what you're left with is this really beautiful brown sugar, vanilla syrup, like a dark cherry, almost like a cherry cola thing that's going on in the nose. But the color on this, I don't know if you guys can see this color. I mean, this is just a beautiful, beautiful dark amber. John Wayne was famously known for calling Old Crow Old Red, because of the color. It has this beautiful, beautiful reddish hue to it. Absolutely beautiful sweet nose, but you can still tell it's just very musty, kind of dusty. If you've ever smelled or ever tasted, if you've ever gone on down into one of those like old basements, Facebook, I don't know who this is. No, I didn't try it yet. I'm still nosing it. I'm still appreciating the nose on it. But like I said, there's like the cinnamon syrup. There's a cherry cola aspect to it, almost like a Dr. Pepper, almost, if that kind of makes sense, like a flat cola. And then a brown sugar, almost like a toasted sugar, like that you would get on like the top of a creme brulee. So again, for those of you who are just joining in, look behind me. You'll see what I'm sampling tonight in my glass. All right, let's go in for the taste. Oh my God. Viscous. I don't want to say sticky because it makes it sound bad, but syrupy. There's a beautiful maple quality in there. Tons of brown sugar. The oak character comes through first and foremost. Just a very slight hint of that barrel char. When you burn wood and you get that layer of black carbon on there. Just very faint in the back. There is a little bit of tannin structure going on, a little bit of tannin structure, a little bit of astringency, right here on the palate, right here on the side of the tongue. And that typically comes from just age in the barrel. But the nose on this is so fantastic. The palate on this is so beautiful. It's very thick. It's got a very oily mouthfeel. Coats the tongue absolutely beautifully. Beautiful dark color to it. It's a shame that bourbon isn't made the way that it was. I mean, it's still made the way that it was. Don't get me wrong, but all the technology that has gone into it and all of the filtration and all of the animatronics that goes into it and all of the electronics that goes into it, it's really kind of, I don't want to say taken out that human factor of it, but it's taken away a lot of character. So you look at bourbons that were distilled even I'll say as late as the early 2000s, and there's still kind of a human factor to it, that somebody's pulling it out of the barrel, somebody's keeping an eye on it constantly, and now it's almost controlled by computers and spreadsheets. And this is really it's a true testament to what bourbon was, and what I feel like a lot of us still want bourbon to be. It's just this very faint, I don't want to say bitterness, but there's a very faint astringency to it. And again, that comes from just time in the oak, time in the decanter, wherever it was that it was stored. But the brown sugar, the cinnamon syrup, the maple, the fig, and the raisin, there's almost like a peach aspect to it, like some sort of stone fruit. I don't get a whole lot of fruit in here. What other whiskey would I compare it to? There's nothing new on the market right now that you would be able to compare this to. The closest thing that I would be able to compare this to would be an old Jim Beam product. Something from the 1970s or from the 1980s or from the 1960s. You see a lot of these decanters that are found in, I found this in my grandfather's basement, or I found this in an estate sale, or, that's really the best thing that I can probably use to describe it. If you've ever had, this is kind of going out on a limb and stretching it here a little bit, but if you've ever had OFC from Buffalo Trace, it's released once a year. It's always a vintage, 1993, 94, 95. It just has this beautiful brown sugar note to it. There's nothing that I can really compare this to modern day, because it's just so incredibly unique. Even if you were to use the same mash bill, which 77% corn, 8% rye, and 15% malted barley, I don't think you could really come close to replicating this, just because the water that was used back in the early 60s, the wood that was used, the way it was charred, all of the different variables that go into it. You're trying to recreate something in 2021 or 2015 that was created, at this point now 70 years ago, or 60 years ago. So there's nothing that I can really compare it to. I guess, like I said, if you've ever tried an OFC from Buffalo Trace, if you've ever tried any of the vintage series from Wild Turkey, the Russell's Reserve 2002 or 2003, there's this kind of almost mustiness to it. Like when you walk into a rick house, when you walk into a rick house and you smell the wood, and you smell the must, and you can smell the dustiness around you, that's really what this reminds me of. And it's this beautiful, absolutely beautiful nose. There's a gorgeous palate to it. Wonderful oily mouthfeel. Like I said, almost kind of sticky. It kind of sticks to your tongue. And then depth of character. We're talking all of this different stuff that's going on in the palate. You've got sweet, you've got oaky, you've got almost a savory note to it. All of this stuff that's kind of trying to play for attention on the palate. That brown sugar and creme brulee flavor and vintage theme, as you've described, reminds me of King of Kentucky. I can't remember the last time I had King of Kentucky. It was probably about maybe 2 years ago, at Niche in downtown Geneva. But yeah, that brown sugar, that toasted sugar that you get on top of a creme brulee, but add in there a barrel rickhouse. Add in there that musty kind of basement, that basement stench, I guess. Remember going over to your grandparents' house and you'd walk into the basement and there's wood paneling on the walls, and we call them Wisconsin bars or Midwest bars. Every basement was lined with that faux wood paneling, and there was a bar in the basement, and that's just that musty kind of dusty aroma that the basement had. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's not off-putting at all in the whiskey. It just that's what it kind of reminds me of is walking into my grandparents' basement lined with that faux wood paneling, seeing that bar back there. And my grandfather, loved martinis, and he had the little cocktail onions, the pearl onions. He'd have his gin back there, his vermouth, his vodka. He'd have all of his clear spirits, because that's what was popular back then, as bourbon was kind of falling out of favor in the 50s and 60s. That's what this kind of smells like almost. On top of that, you get these sugary notes, these syrupy notes. This I don't want to say has been disappointing in any way, and the legs on this are thick and runny. I mean, this is just sugary, syrupy sweetness. I don't think you can see. Maybe you can see them on the glass there. You can kind of see the legs. They're just thick and running down the side of the glass. I have this tendency to kind of hype things up and talk them up a lot, to based on what I hear and what I've heard and what I'm hoping for something to be. Proof and age. So proof. 86 proof, 10 years old. So this would have been distilled in 1959, released in 1969. What I would love for you guys to do, so you can see the whole set. I have one of the pawns behind me. Again, there's nothing in there; it's empty. What I have in here is just from a sample that I got from a friend. Go on the internet, go onto Google and Google the Old Crow Chessmen set, and it came with, I don't know, however many pieces are on a chessboard, with 36 pieces maybe. There was this color, which is the beige or the brown, and then there was a green. And then actually, once you collected the whole set, you could actually get a rug that was a chess board. And that was kind of the idea. Again, back in the 1960s and 1970s, when whiskey distillers were trying anything to sell old stocks of whiskey. They'd put them into a decanter to see if that would sell. And lo and behold, here we are 60 years later. We're glamoring over this stuff, and we want it in the collection. I wish that was full. It's not. It's empty. It smells terrible inside, but if this stuff was in it, I would certainly be excited. But going back to my point, I hyped this up a lot, over the years, listening to people talk about it, how it's the best whiskey that they've ever tried. And by the way, no, I haven't put any water in it yet. I'm not actually not going to. They talk about this being the best whiskey they're the best bourbon they've ever had. I kind of talk this up to myself, and I get myself all psyched up, and I hype up a product. I will say that while this is absolutely fantastic, this is not the best bourbon, I think, from my palate that I've ever had. It is really, really great. I am so fortunate. I feel so fortunate to be able to have sampled it. To have tried it, and to have gotten on here and kind of shared the experience with you guys. It's that barrel that I get most on the palate. Again, it's brown sugar and vanilla, cinnamon syrup, maple syrup. There's a thickness to this that's just absolutely fantastic, that I really just kind of can't get over. There's really not much left in my glass now. What I love doing, though, is once I finish the glass, I love to let it just kind of dry out and air out, and then I like to go back to it and nose just the dry glass, to get up, pick up any other notes that I may have missed, once all the ethanol has evaporated out of there, and once all the liquid is gone. Absolutely fantastic. Not the best bourbon I've ever had in my life, but still absolutely, absolutely fantastic. Um, I highly recommend, if you guys ever happen to see somebody selling a sample of it, if you happen to see anybody selling a full bottle of it, um, it if it's something that you really want to try, if it's something that you're really eager to um, to review, if it's something that's just been on your list for a long time, if you happen to see somebody selling samples of this, get one, because it's definitely worth it. It's a once in a lifetime. Do you tap that glass after you know? I mean, what I do behind closed doors. Yeah, there's just a beautiful dustiness to it, beautiful mustiness. Absolutely fantastic. So that is about 20 minutes for me. That was the Old Crow Chessman, 1969, my dusty unicorn that I'm feel super fortunate to have been able to sample with you guys. Like I said, if you ever get a chance to get a sample of it, or if you find a whole bottle of it, 100% recommend 100% recommend trying it. With that, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube. We have more episodes coming up on the Glassless Traveled. I will be on again in a couple weeks with Nick from Whiskey Acres. Don't forget to join our groups, the Fox Valley Whiskey Society and the Atlantic Coast Whiskey Society. You can also catch us on Patreon for an opportunity to get behind the scenes look at barrel picks and to actually be a part of the barrel pick team at patreon.com/ Fox Valley Whiskey Society. So with that, everybody, cheers. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday night, and I will see you all in a couple weeks on the Glass Less Traveled with Nick from Whiskey Acres. Cheers, everybody.